Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. Good evening, fellow denizens of the dark. I'm Steve Taylor, host of the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights podcast. And tonight, we're celebrating the winner of the 2019 Evil Idol voice acting competition, Luis Bermudez. Luis was one of just 50 contestants handpicked from a field of over 300 applicants to compete in the 2019 contest, and went on to take first place after 4 grueling rounds of competition spanning several months, in which he was judged not only by a panel of 9 veteran voice talents on our roster, including former Evil Idol competitors and champions, but by you, the audience, as well. If you'd like to see just how much talent he was up against, check the video description and stickied comments below for links to a playlist and the competition's page on our official website. To celebrate Luis's historic victory this year, we've compiled 6 of his terror-inducing performances into this video for you, including all 4 of his competition narrations, alongside a piece he performed for a recent episode of our podcast, and a brand new narration never before released anywhere. We'll get into the action in just a moment, but before we do, Luis has a few words he'd like to share with you himself. Take it away, Luis.
Hey guys, Luis Bermudez here, winner of the 2019 Evil Idol competition, which went into 2020. I wanted to deliver a quick little thank you message to everyone at ctfdn and Craig for bringing me on. It's been awesome building a relationship with you and everyone at the channel, and I can't wait to grow with you. I think you guys are doing really cool stuff in the audio world. I also wanted to thank the panel of judges. You guys were insanely detailed in your critiques of my performance, and I feel like having you there improved my performance significantly from beginning to end. And I also wanted to thank the 2 writers I borrowed stories from, Lucretia, Vastea, and Max Voynich. They are incredibly talented with their writing, and you guys really need to check both of them out. They're incredibly talented, and they were immensely important to me being able to submit all of my entries on time, because I had some trouble writing my own all the time. And lastly, thank you to the fans. You guys are amazing, and I'm so happy that I could keep you all entertained through something as shitty as a global pandemic. Honestly, everything in this contest that I've had to do with ctfdn and with you guys has been amazing, and I look at you guys as almost a second or extension family, kind of, away from the voiceover world. It's just such a different crowd, and I'm so happy to be a part of it, and I'm glad that you guys like my stuff, and hopefully I get to make more of it for you guys in the future. Stay safe, stay healthy, and don't be afraid of the dark. I love you guys. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Luis Bermudez. Not only talented, but humble as well. What more could you ask for in a king? Now that we've played nice and given everyone the warm and fuzzies, it's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark with 6 creeptastic tales brought to life by the 2019 Evil Idol champion himself, Luis Bermudez, beginning with a brand new narration of a tale by Ashley Rose Wellman. Sweet dreams, listeners. Sweet dreams.
I grew up in a tiny town in Vermont. Tiny in terms of population, not size. There were huge sprawling farms and wooded areas, but almost no people. More cows than people, which is standard for a lot of small towns in Vermont. So, clearly not the most fun in the world for a kid who was sick of freezing winters and awful balmy summers surrounded by boring Vermonters that didn't have many kids my age. My only close friend was Tina, who was a year older than me. We spent almost all our time with each other, constantly dreaming about life outside of Vermont. The people in our town were strange folk, different than in other places. One thing I didn't realize about small towns until I moved to the city is how incredibly superstitious people in towns like mine could be. They believed in the strange, the paranormal. They believed in Luvia. Luvia was an older French-Canadian woman who had moved to Vermont when she met her husband, and everyone in town thought she was a clairvoyant. Psychic. Even my own parents did. One day, my mother lost her wedding ring. She had looked around everywhere for it. They called Luvia, and she immediately told them it was under old rotting wood. They looked in the backyard where my father had been tearing apart a decaying piano he'd found. My mother had helped him one day. The ring was there, under old, rotting wood. After hearing a lot about Luvia from older townsfolk who seemed to think she was 100% credible, Tina and I decided to go see her one evening to try to find out whatever she could tell us about the future. I was skeptical, but it seemed like a fun thing to do as a joke. So we dropped by her house in the early evening, and she opened the door as we walked up the pathway to her house, before we even had a chance to knock. Tina elbowed me hard in the ribs and whispered that Luvia was clearly a psychic. She sensed us coming to the door. I whispered back that it probably had more to do with her house being full of windows and the fact that she probably saw us coming from a long way away. Either way, I started to feel strange the minute we got close to her. She was very, very old, very tiny, and kind of sunken. Sunken eye sockets and sharp cheekbones and a sort of concave chest cavity. It was more than a little unnerving, but she smiled and was sweet to us, and I started to warm up to her. Nothing about her or her house screamed creepy psychic to me, just a well-dressed older woman in a cabin-style house. It looked like you'd imagine any typical grandmother's home. Doilies, knitting, family magazines, etc. We told her that we were interested in a clairvoyant reading, and handed her about $20 that we had scrounged together between the two of us. She led us to her kitchen table and asked which of us wanted to go first. "What can you tell me about my love life?" Tina asked. Luvia had no crystal ball, tarot cards, or tea leaves. She just closed her eyes and sat silently for about 2 minutes. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Michael Carten." Tina stared at her for a few seconds until Luvia repeated, "Michael Carten, the man you're going to marry. Michael Carten." Tina thanked her and repeated the name to herself a few times. Michael Carten, Michael Carten, Michael Carten. Luvia then turned to me. "Whatever you can tell me, I'd like to hear," I said. "It doesn't have to be about my love life or anything." Luvia closed her eyes for a few seconds, but information about me seemed to reach her much quicker than her visions of Tina's husband. She looked straight into my eyes, grabbed my hands, and said, "The thing that will kill you is shedding its skin. The thing that will kill you is sharpening its teeth. The thing that will kill you is washing the blood off its claws. The thing that will kill you is gathering skins. The thing that will kill you, you won't see coming." The three of us sat there in silence for quite a while. I felt sick, shaken up. Luvia looked as if she wished she didn't have to tell me that. Is there anything I can do to stop it?" I asked. Luvia slid our money back across the table to us. "No charge for the reading." Tina and I slunk out of Luvia's house quietly. We didn't say a word on the way back to our houses. Tina just found out the name of the love of her life. I got to listen to a horrifying cryptic message about my death. I was 12 years old. I was fucking terrified. When Tina left me at my doorstep, she tried to make light of the readings. "How does she know who I'm going to marry?" she asked. And it's not like some monster's going to get you, some skin-shedding, bloody, sharp. It's not like some monster's going to get you. It's not like some monster isn't going to get you. For years, I looked for it. The thing that will kill me. I could almost feel it. Sensed it just behind each car, swaying behind the trees at night, underneath the fresh snow, waiting outside my window. With every step, I hesitated. Every time I tried to sleep, I could almost see it. What had she said about its teeth? I looked out for sloughed skin, for blood, for skins, for hides, but I never found it. When I was 18, I left for college in California, to get far away from the snow and the cold and the thing that will kill me. I stopped sensing it everywhere. My heart stopped pounding whenever I walked alone at night. Maybe whatever it was, it stayed in Vermont. Maybe it wasn't a thing at all. People in California laughed when I told them the story, and it stopped seeming real. Just the ramblings of a tiny, ancient French-Canadian woman. It wasn't real. When I was 27, a wedding invitation came in the mail. Tina was getting married. This was the first I had heard of it. I was still in California and barely kept in contact with anyone from back east. It seemed like a past life. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Michael Carton and Tina. Wait. No. Clearly she had the name in her mind. Michael Carton. And she sought him out. It had nothing to do with Luvia. Her predictions weren't real. They couldn't be. Clairvoyants don't exist. It's ridiculous to think that kind of thing happens in the real world. I went to the wedding. Tina, Michael, and I laughed about the whole thing. The psychic knew. She predicted it. Of course she didn't. Tina and Michael decided it was nothing more than a funny story to tell their future children. Just tell us if you run into some beast with razor-sharp teeth that's gathering skins, okay? Then we'll think it's more than just a funny coincidence. I left the wedding as sure as I ever was that the thing that will kill me wasn't real. Didn't exist. I looked behind the trees, behind the cars. Nothing was waiting for me. Nothing was ready to skin me. I didn't know why I had been scared so long. The best thing about Tina's wedding was that we got back in touch for the first time in a very long time. We were very different people than we had been as children, but we still shared more of a bond than we realized. She was happy, living in Vermont with Michael. She told me everything that was going on in our town. The population slowly increasing, the new schools they were building, the babies that were born, Luvia dying. As the years went on, her calls and emails got less and less frequent. She always seemed to be busy. Soon, they tapered off completely. I missed her, of course, but I had my own life, and I could check in on my childhood home whenever I wanted. One winter, I came into town to visit my parents for the holidays, and decided I'd swing by Tina's house. I'd normally never just drop by, but she was pretty bad about answering her phone, and I really wanted to see her. I pulled up to her and Michael's house. 2 cars were in the driveway, so I figured they were both home. I walked up and rang the doorbell. Michael opened it, dressed in several layers and a large coat, as if he had just come in from the snow. He invited me inside. He looked very surprised to see me and asked if I had talked to Tina recently. I haven't, actually. Not in several months. Sorry for the invasion. I don't usually just drop by like this, but I was wondering if I could see her. I figured you'd know. That you'd have heard. She left me a few months ago. Just up and left. Hasn't spoke to me since. Oh, God, I said. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He took off his coat and hung it on a coat rack by the door. Can I take your coat? He asked. I told him it was all right, that I wouldn't be staying long. I was just so shocked she'd do something like that. He was a really good guy. I'm sorry, I was about to get ready for bed. I've got an early workday tomorrow. Do you mind? He kicked off his shoes, pulled his sweater off, and headed toward his bathroom. I settled in, looked around their home. Of course, I don't mind. Do you know where she went? I don't, he yelled from the bathroom, mouth full of toothpaste. She didn't call until after she was gone. That's awful. I'm sorry. He started flossing, and when he saw me looking toward him, closed the door for privacy. When I heard the shower water start running, I pulled out my phone, figured I'd take this time to look through Tina's last messages to me, to see if she gave any hint to where she went, any clue. My phone fell out of my hand as I grabbed it out of my bag, and I saw it drop beneath the couch. As I felt around under the couch for my phone, my hand hit something else, a massive clump of long hair. I pulled it out from beneath the couch. It seemed so strange, such a large mass of hair. Brown hair. Tina's shade. Hair with a piece of scalp still attached. The thing that will kill you is gathering skins. I turned toward the bathroom door. Michael was still showering. The thing that will kill you is washing the blood off its claws, flossing, brushing. The thing that will kill you is sharpening its teeth, sloughing off his outer clothes, his shoes. The thing that will kill you is shedding its skin. Oh God, the thing that will kill me. I heard the water in the shower stop, movements from inside the bathroom. I ran out the door, slammed the door, sprinted to my car, shaking, watching the door. My hands fumbled with the keys, shaking. The door to the house opened. My car started. I drove. I didn't look back. I drove all through the night, through most of the next day, only stopping when I absolutely had to. I had no idea if he was following me. I had no idea what I had just seen. My heart didn't start beating normally again until I was 2 states away. I went home. This was months ago. I called the police. They investigated. Nothing turned up. They're sure she just left him, moved away. Maybe she did. Maybe she's far away, safe. Maybe nothing's coming for me. Maybe Michael's just a poor guy whose wife left him. Maybe it's nothing behind the trees, in the snowdrifts, underneath the cars, outside my door at night, and the windows. Maybe it's nothing. Probably it's nothing. Luvia's been wrong before, hasn't she? The thing that will kill you, you won't see coming. July 5th, 2010. I don't really know what to say. Last week, I was in a bad car crash. The doctors said that I suffered some brain injuries in the crash and that it's a miracle that I'm not dead. They also said that I needed to stay on top of things, especially when it came to memory. I guess I'm supposed to be writing in a diary for 2 months? 2 whole months. I'm a man. Men don't write in diaries. But Dr. Schneider said that this would be good for me. I guess that means I'm going to be writing for a while. It doesn't have to be everything that I do every day, just 1 or 2 things that happen to me each day. So, I guess day 1 is going to be my personal information. My name is James Hunter. I live in Sheboygan, Michigan. It's not a huge house. It's basically just the upstairs and the basement. I have an attic, but I haven't ever been up there. I guess one of my favorite things about this house is the fact that it's secluded. I live out in the country, so no one ever goes past here. That makes it the perfect spot for murder. I'm not a murderer. The truth is, I got this house for a really low cost because someone was murdered in it a year before I moved in. I don't really know much about the murder, but I know that the body was found on the old wooden staircase that leads from the basement to the garage. Anyway, a young couple moved into the house 6 months later and left a month later when they found the basement steps broken. They were sure it was a ghost that broke the stairs. They found out later that the steps were old and rotten and the husband fell through while he was sleepwalking. But they refused to move back in. That's why I moved here. I'm a huge fan of the paranormal. I saw my grandmother's ghost appear at the foot of my bed once when I was 11 years old. Ever since then, I've been trying to get another ghost to appear to me. So far, no luck. However, I'm hopeful that this house will bring me the paranormal experience I crave so badly. In fact, when I moved in here on June 12th of this year, I spent my entire first night here examining that staircase. It's actually very interesting. There apparently used to be access to the area under the steps for storage, but that was closed off when the staircase was remodeled. Now it's surrounded by walls of concrete, and I can't even see through to the area underneath. The vertical wooden planks that connect to the horizontal ones fill up all the open space. Sorry, diary. I know you didn't want to hear some dumb ghost enthusiast talk about a creaky old staircase. I just hope that there is some actual paranormal activity going on here. I've been living here for a month now, and so far, no luck. Anyway, I think that's plenty for one day. I'm going to go to bed now. Talk to you tomorrow. I'm talking to my diary like it's a person. I really am going insane. Note to self. If you name this diary, I'm calling the men in the white jackets. July 16th, 2010. After 12 boring entries in this journal, I finally have something worth writing about. Something happened to me last night. Something extraordinary. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep when I heard something coming from the basement beneath my room. It sounded like something heavy scraping across the cement floor. Excited, I jumped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight from my kitchen table, and rushed down the stairs to the basement. Naturally, the first thing I did was stand on the wooden staircase and scan the entire room. Nothing seemed out of place. Hello? I asked the dark room. Is someone there? I waited for a while, but received no response. Can I talk to whoever is here? I don't want to hurt you. Can you tell me your name? Again, I was answered with silence. Curious as to what I heard move, I grabbed the biggest thing in my basement, which was the dryer, and pulled it away from the wall. It made a loud scraping sound, but it wasn't quite like what I heard. I then tried the same thing with the washing machine, workbench, and treadmill, but none of these sounded right. The workbench sounded most like what I thought I heard, but it still didn't seem right. I stayed up until 3:30 this morning searching for answers, but there was still no evidence that a ghost was involved. July 17th, 2010. Call me crazy if you want. Maybe I am crazy. I still have no clue who these comments are directed at. I guess I'll just assume that Dr. Schneider will end up reading these journal entries. Anyway, I called in a psychic today. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't he know that psychics just scam your money? Well, I'm not so sure. The psychic's name was Lori Marvin. She came in early this morning to scan my house for spiritual activity. Surprise, surprise. She knew that something very dark had happened on those steps in the basement. I swear I didn't tell her anything before she went down there. She said that she was getting a strong reading from a spirit named Carlton as she stood on the wooden staircase leading to the garage. That's all that she could tell me. I asked if he meant any harm, but she told me that she didn't know. Still, Carlton is something to go on. After Miss Marvin left, I decided that it was time for me to hit the internet and see if anyone named Carlton has died recently in Sheboygan. As it turns out, Carlton Mueller was the name of the man who was murdered by Tyler Frank, his business partner, on those wooden stairs last year. Who's a fraud now, huh? July 23rd, 2010. I know. I'm sorry that I haven't been writing in my journal recently. To tell the truth, I've been so busy with my new job as Sheboygan's new newspaper editor that I haven't had time. I figured that writing in newspapers was similar enough to writing in my journal that it would be okay. Dr. Schneider, however, told me yesterday that it was not okay and that these journals are for my own benefit. He said that I'm supposed to be writing to help me remember my life. I guess it's a little true. Ever since my entry on the 19th about going fishing with Jerry, my memory's been a little foggy. I guess I'll have to remember to write in this journal more often. Oh well, I sincerely apologize to myself. I accept. Hooray. Cake and beer all around. July 29th, 2010. Oh my God. I'm so happy I could cry. Actually, I'll be honest, I did cry. I wrote in my diary and I cried, but I don't even care how curly that makes me sound anymore. I have seen the most amazing thing in my entire life. I was lying in my bed last night when I realized that I had left the bathroom light on. So I rolled over and got out of bed. I opened up my bedroom door and looked down the hallway. What I saw actually almost made me wet my pants. It was a man. A grown man. He was standing on the other end of the hallway, just staring at my bedroom door. The light from the bathroom illuminated his face beautifully. He had a tall head with short, black hair. A few whiskers were scattered across his face, giving him a rugged, tired look. "Hello?" I asked nervously. The man didn't answer. "Are you Carlton?" I forced the words out of my mouth. To my delight, the figure nodded. I was talking to a ghost. I couldn't believe it. Just to make sure I wasn't dreaming, I pinched my arm as hard as I could. The intense pain convinced me that this was real. "How did you die?" I inquired. Of course, I already knew the answer. I just wanted the ghost to speak to me. Sadly, he did not. He simply stared at me with steady eyes. I don't know how long Carlton and I looked at each other. It could have only been 10 minutes, but it felt more like an hour. No matter what I asked, the ghost of Carlton Mueller would not speak to me. The only response I received from Carlton all night was when he nodded his head to confirm that he was, in fact, Carlton. I finally returned to my bed after bidding Carlton goodnight. When I woke up this morning, he was gone. August 3rd, 2010. Well, I was starting to get worried that Carlton wouldn't show up again. Every morning that I wake up since I first saw him, I find the furniture in the dining room, living room, and basement completely rearranged. I knew that this was Carlton, and I didn't care. Really, it's just that, well, I wished he'd show his face again. And he did. Last night, I was sleeping soundly when I heard something move in my room. I woke up and rolled over, expecting to see a chair on its side, courtesy of my good friend Carlton Mueller. Instead, I saw Carlton himself standing over my bed, staring down directly into my eyes. I nearly screamed, but I didn't want to scare him away. So I quietly whispered, "Hello, Carlton." Carlton didn't react. I asked him if he wanted me to wake up. Once again, he stood in place, like a statue. I tried to get him to answer me, but just like on the night of July 28th, he didn't move a muscle. Finally, I sighed and rolled over. I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I'm glad that I saw Carlton again. On the other hand, I definitely did not like the way he stood in the middle of my bedroom, staring at me while I slept. Who knows how long he was there after I fell asleep? More importantly, what if he stands there every night, and last night was just the first time I saw him? The malicious look in his dark eyes as he stared at me was unsettling. August 4th, 2010. I couldn't sleep last night. Yesterday, I thought that I wasn't scared of Carlton. I thought that after a day, I'd have had enough time to get over it. Now, however, I'm positive that I am actually intimidated. In fact, intimidated is an understatement. I lay awake in my bed all night long, shaking like crazy. I couldn't stand the thought of waking up and seeing Carlton watching me with such a malevolent glare again. I don't know how Tyler Frank killed Carlton Mueller, but it must have been horrible. That is one pissed off spirit. But I can't let my emotions control me like this. Writing in my journal may very well be the only thing keeping me sane after that incident, which is ironic since I feel like I'm talking to myself. Regardless of whether or not I'm actually insane, I will not let Carlton's presence in my house affect me like this. This is my house, not his. I shouldn't have to leave just because of a ghost. More importantly, if I let him scare me like this, he will feed on my fear, and very likely he will do it again. I really don't want him to scare me again. However, know this, Carlton. If you try to scare me again, I will not be afraid. I will not leave my house because of you, Carlton Mueller. August 5th, 2010. Well, this is a good reason to celebrate. It's been a month since I was assigned this project, and that means I only have a month left. I would crack open a bottle of champagne if I wasn't scared to death of going into the basement. Last night, I didn't sleep again. All night, I heard noises coming from the basement. I kept my bedroom door closed and locked as if ghosts needed to use doors. I don't know what Carlton's doing down there, but it's really annoying. At least I can rely on the fact that as long as he's moving stuff around downstairs, he can't be watching me upstairs. And all night long, I kept hearing that scraping noise over and over. That same scraping noise. That's another thing. I wish I knew what that was. I've completely rearranged everything in my basement since that first night when I heard Carlton. But nothing makes that specific sound. I just can't figure out what it is. I am absolutely 100% positive that nothing in my basement makes that noise. So what is it? August 6th, 2010. So I saw Dr. Schneider yesterday, again. He said that my head injury may have affected me worse than he originally thought. He said that insomnia might be due to brain damage. I laughed and explained that I've been staying awake because a ghost watches me when I sleep. For some reason, that didn't comfort him. August 14th, 2010. I went downstairs. I finally got up the courage to go down into my basement. Of course, I didn't see Carlton. There were no signs that Carlton had ever been down there. In fact, everything in the basement was exactly the way I left it when I last came upstairs. I was kind of hoping that I would see something out of place so that I knew that Carlton was moving around down there. Actually, it's kind of odd. Every morning I still find things in different places than where I left them. However, these occurrences are confined only to my living room, kitchen, dining room, guest bedroom, and bathroom. The basement and my bedroom remain untouched. Weird, huh? Anyway, I'm glad that I went down to the basement. It made me feel safer, being in the place I knew to be the source of Carlton's ghost, and yet experiencing nothing paranormal. It was somewhat comforting. I mean, I haven't seen Carlton since he woke me up on the night of the 2nd. Maybe he knows that he scared me, and maybe he didn't mean to. I'm starting to think that Carlton might not be such a bad guy after all. August 21st, 2010. I can't handle this anymore. Every day I sit down at my desk and write down whatever it was that I did that day, like some lab rat. I feel like a child who's been ordered to color a picture. I am not Snyder's damn lab rat. Last night, I left my door unlocked. It's been almost 20 days since I saw Carlton in my bedroom, so I thought I might be safe. God, why am I so unlucky? I woke up at 3 a.m. this morning and I knew instantly that there was someone standing over me. I slowly rolled over and, of course, saw Carlton. But he wasn't standing in the same place he was in the last time he was in my room. This time, he was standing right over my bed. He looked different than he had before, too. His hair was much messier than I remembered seeing it the first night. And his eyes, they made me shudder. They were surrounded by darkness, and the first thought I had when I saw them was evil. I had never really considered Carlton evil before last night. Maybe a troublemaker, a creeper, and a bit mischievous, but not evil. I gasped loudly when I saw him. His reaction didn't change as usual. "Carlton!" I nearly shouted. Remembering to keep my emotional distress to a minimum, I corrected my tone and continued. "Why are you here?" As I predicted, Carlton didn't reply. "Please leave," I said quietly, not breaking my eye contact with him. Carlton's eyes widened to a frightening size, and his head tilted a little bit. No, I said quickly, sitting up and backing up to the other side of my bed. "I didn't mean that you should leave the house. I meant you should leave my bedroom. Please," I added when Carlton's eyes narrowed and his nostrils flared angrily. "Look, I don't want you to leave the house," I insisted. "I want you to stay." Very slowly and deliberately, Carlton moved around my bed to the side that I had crawled to. "But, when I'm sleeping, that's my time, Carlton." When the ghost didn't stop, I scooted back over to the side of the bed I woke up on. "Carlton, please, don't hurt me. I've never done anything to hurt you. Why would you go after me?" Carlton didn't answer. He walked quietly to the foot of my bed and stood there with his usual overseeing attitude. He didn't leave until I fell asleep again. I woke up this morning and found my bedroom door open. I can't live like this for much longer. If I can't get Carlton out of this house, I'm going to have to move out and let someone else deal with him. August 22nd, 2010. I locked my bedroom door again last night, and there was no sign of Carlton. I'm never unlocking that door again. I think Carlton thinks it's my way of welcoming him into my bedroom. I just hope I didn't hurt his feelings. Wait, what am I saying? I hope I didn't hurt the ghost's feelings? That's ridiculous. He came into my home, moved all my stuff, scared me to death, and I'm saying that I hope I didn't hurt his feelings? Forget that. I hope he went home to his ghost mama, cried ghost tears, ate a whole gallon of ghost ice cream, and ended up losing his ghost leg to ghost diabetes. I don't care what Carlton wants anymore. I want Carlton gone. It's really too bad that he's a ghost, because if he wasn't, I'd wish he was dead. And again, I think both Carlton and I would be happier if he was still alive. August 28th, 2010. The exterminator came over today to spray his bug-killing stuff like he was every month since I've moved in here. While he was here, he decided to make my life even more miserable by telling me that I have a termite problem. Why the hell not? I mean, everything else in my life has gone wrong. My house has termites. My life is being tormented by an evil poltergeist. I may or may not have permanent brain damage, and I'm probably going insane because of all this crap put together. I want to die. At least then, I'd be able to make someone else's life as horrifying as Carlton has made mine. But wait, I need to get my house fumigated. No, I'm not an idiot. I know that fumigating my house won't kill a ghost. However, it will give me a good reason to move out for a day or two. I'll sleep better than I have in my entire life if I can be sure that I won't wake up with the ghost of Carlton Mueller standing over me. August 29th, 2010. Sweet relief. I decided to move into my hotel room a little prematurely, and I couldn't be happier. The instant I stepped into my room, I thought, this feels more like a home than home does. How about that? But I only have a few days of this. My house is getting fumigated tomorrow, and the bug man said that I should be able to move back in on Tuesday, August 31st. But you know what? I might decide to stay here a little longer. It's nice being able to sleep. September 1st, 2010. Today was the most disturbing day of my life. Yes, it was even more disturbing than when Carlton tried to attack me. I moved back into my house yesterday and slept in my bed. Of course, I locked my bedroom door. I thought that would keep Carlton out. I woke up at 3 again this morning. I opened my eyes slowly, afraid of what I would find. However, quite predictably, Carlton was standing next to my bed. I sat up quickly. "Carlton, please, stay away from me," I begged, but I realized quickly that Carlton wasn't looking at me. He had been looking down at the floor with a sad expression on his face. "What?" I asked, completely bewildered. When I said this, his head jerked up and his eyes pointed directly into mine. They seemed different tonight, though. They were much less hateful. After a moment, Carlton gestured for me to stand up. "You want me to stand?" I asked. Without answering me, Carlton turned and walked straight through my locked door. I got up quickly and rushed to the door. Unlocking it, I pulled it open hastily and found Carlton standing just on the other side, staring at me as if he could see through the door. I jumped, but prevented myself from screaming. Carlton turned around and walked down the hallway to the staircase. It was strange to watch him walk. His feet almost didn't touch the floor, as if he was walking through a pool of neck-high water. Picking up on his urgency, I followed him through the hallway and down the stairs. When Carlton stepped into the basement, I grew wary about following him any further. I had heard some stories that ghosts gained power when they were in the places they were killed. What if he wanted to kill me? My curiosity outweighed my caution, and I entered my basement. With no hesitation, Carlton walked straight through the basement to the wooden staircase on which he was killed. He stopped right next to it and gestured for me to stand at the base of the first step. I did. Carlton pointed to the 3rd and 4th steps, and then gestured toward the ceiling. "Am I supposed to..." "What? Lift them up or something?" I asked, confused. Carlton nodded. I felt stupid doing it, but I tried anyway. To my surprise, as I pulled up on the 3rd and 4th steps to the wooden staircase, they shifted slightly. I looked over at Carlton, who nodded stoically. I gulped, realizing that my mouth was uncomfortably dry. I fixed my grip on the steps and pulled up again. This time they came off of the staircase in one piece with a loud scraping sound. I knew that sound. I knew it so well. I heard it coming from my basement every night. I looked inside the hole made from the lack of the 3rd and 4th steps, but I couldn't see anything. "Hold on," I said to Carlton. "Let me go and get my flashlight." I dashed up the stairs, grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen table, and ran back down. Carlton was still standing in the exact same place he had been before I left. He pointed inside the hole. I knelt down and shone my flashlight through the stairs. Inside, I saw a body. A dead body. I gagged and dropped the flashlight. It fell to the floor where it flickered and resumed its regular glow. Forcing myself to control my reflexes, I picked up the flashlight and aimed it at the body. It was a man's body, and I saw the face clearly. I felt my entire body was paralyzed. I knew that face. I called the police immediately, and they were there within 15 minutes. They investigated my entire house from top to bottom. They even searched the attic. The sergeant, Dale Turner, asked me to give him a statement, so I told him exactly what happened. I woke up at 3, and there was a ghost at the end of my bed, I said. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. He led me down the stairs and into the basement, where he showed me how to lift up these steps. So I did, and I found his body. "You found whose body?" Sergeant Turner asked. "The, ghost?" "Yes, it was the body of Carlton Mueller," I told him. "I think his spirit's been trying to communicate with me for a while. I've been seeing his ghost around my house for the past month now." "Did you say month?" the sergeant inquired. "Yeah, I first saw him on July 29th. Ever since then, he kept showing up. "Mr. Hunter," Sergeant Turner said quietly, "this man that you found, we've been looking for him for about 2 months now. But he's only been dead for a couple of days." All Joe Jenkins wanted was to go to bed. Work had been tough on him, and lunch hardly edible. Not to mention his car's CD player, yes, CD player, was broken, and no radio station was playing Alice in Chains on a loop like he would have liked. All Joe Jenkins wished for at that moment in time was to lay down and cuddle to his sleeping wife right after tucking Josephine in. Professional letdowns aside, it went as fairy tale perfect as it did every evening. Joe would enter his daughter's room, would chat a little about how her day went, then kiss her on the forehead and wish her pleasant dreams. Those almond-shaped green eyes were his entire world, and neither a stressful day at work nor a speeding ticket would stop Joe from giving his baby girl her goodnight kiss. "Daddy, I think there's something under my bed." It was the same as every night. Joe was getting a little tired of it, but even so, he was her hero. So, he did what every hero would have done and got on his knees. "There's nothing for you to worry, honey. There's nothing under..." And there she was. From under the bed, his frightened little girl whispered with teary green eyes, "Daddy, I think there's something on my bed." All Joe Jenkins asked for was for a quiet, peaceful good night's sleep. He knew that website well, the website where all the world's shortest horror stories were posted. Being the bored security guard he would always indulge in those stories during work. What else was he to do, except scanning IDs and taking good looks at the 20 or so individuals going in and out of the office building for the entirety of his 10-hour shift? Reading short horror stories was a good way to pass the time, and funny enough, this scenario was exactly one of them. The thing is, the author of that particular story never wrote what was to happen after the parent gets up. Joe Jenkins felt all the liquid in his body boil. He had no choice, however. Joe was a skeptic to the bone, but not even the mind of a skeptic is immune to a hypothesis. Joe felt like he was risking being eaten alive as he lifted his upper body to look on the bed again. All of his 180 pounds of muscle shook in the process, but no monster in sight, just his beautiful little Josie waiting for him to tell her that everything's fine, that nobody's there. Joe was still shaking. What the hell was going on? Was his mind playing tricks on him? He ducked down and looked under the bed anew. "Can I come out now, Daddy? It's cold down here." His heart was breaking seeing her that way. But what was he to do? "When's your birthday?" Both girls answered simultaneously. 18th of May? 18th of May? Joe cursed under his breath. If this was a dream, it was time to wake up. But this couldn't have been a dream. He could remember everything that happened prior that day, and the picture before him was not milky at the edges as dreams usually are. This was real. A real nightmare. "Come out of there, baby." The baby part slipped out involuntarily. How could he tell which one was his real baby? They were absolutely identical. Josie let out a high-pitched yelp when she saw another Josie rise from underneath her bed. "It's all right, honey," Joe assured her. "Daddy's here. There's no need for you to be scared. Sit up, please." She did as she was told, never taking her gaze off her doppelganger. Josie from under the bed hid behind her father with the self-composure of a deer in the middle of a wolf gathering. "It's all right. It's okay. It's just a misunderstanding." Joe's mind was wheeling. "Go take a seat next to her, please." Both Josies began to protest lively as tears swelled up their irises. Neither of them wanted to approach the other. "Quiet! Go sit over there. I need to think." The girls went silent, even though their quiet sobs would escape from between their lips as the distance between them got smaller. The Josie on the bed grabbed the headboard as if her life depended on it. The other Josie approached the bed very warily and sat down so far from the other that she would have fallen off the bed if her feet weren't supporting her from the floor. Both girls were staring daggers into the other, the amount of fear in their eyes undeniable and identically genuine. Joe Jenkins looked at the one on the right and the one on the left. He got closer and looked at the one on the left and then at the one on the right. He was a security guard, for Pete's sake. Weird noises coming from the office building when everybody else was gone never scared him, but this was on a whole different level. There was no denying it. One of them was the real Josephine and the other one an otherworldly imposter. Which was which, however, he couldn't tell, and it was shattering him into millions of pieces. What kind of a father couldn't tell his beloved child from a fake? Not him. He'll be able to tell which is which in no time. Josie? Both Josies looked his way expectantly. One of you is telling the truth. The other one is lying. Joe saw this in a cartoon once. He thought the trick was brilliant, even though he never imagined he'd need it in real life. If you were the other, which one would you say is the real Josie? The two girls exchanged a glance, then looked at their father, dead determined to prove to him that the other one is the liar. She would say that she's the real Josie. So would she, Daddy. She would say she's the real Josie. Joe bit the inside of his cheek. Of course it didn't work, and it was stupid of him to believe that it would. Please, scooch closer to each other. The hurricane of cried-out no's would have been enough to wake Jane up, but his wife was the last thing on his mind at the moment. Girls, I'm losing my nerve here. Either you get closer to each other, or I'm leaving the room and turning the light off on my way out. The two girls went silent and scooched next to each other so fast the bed sheet almost caught fire. Joe crouched in front of them. Everything about the two girls was identical. Even the thin streak of blonde hair and the long, straight, light brown mane. Even the two small yellow dots in their left eyes. Please show me your knees. Both girls lifted their nighties above their knees. Good Lord. It was there, on both of them. A deep purple spot in the shape of a whale on their right knees. It was from last week, when Josie practiced riding her new bike without the helping wheels and went straight into the mailbox. I need to see your left shoulders. The girls complied. And there it was again. 2 identical scars from the vaccination right after birth. Open your mouths and stick out your tongues. And so they did, and funny enough, Joe was deeply disappointed to see no pool of never-ending darkness in either cavity. The insides of their mouths were perfectly identical. Tongue, throat, straight milk-white teeth. Jesus. Even their left canines were slightly bent in the same direction. He grabbed his daughter on the left and glued his ear to her chest. A scared little heart, beating rapidly. He grabbed the one on the right and repeated the process. A little heart beating just as fast and just as frightened as the other one. Joe was desperate and frustrated and so scared he debated with himself if he should ask Jane if she hid the existence of Josie's twin from him or something. It was crazy, but so was the picture before him. That's it. I'm getting your mother. And just as he got up and took 2 steps towards the door, I can prove I'm the real Josie, Daddy. His daughter on the right got to her feet, shivering. The one on the left seemed less scared and more curious. Joe looked straight in the eyes of the one who spoke. How? Last week, I asked you to keep a secret for me. A secret only you and me know. Josie on the left went googly-eyed. It was true. Josie told Joe a week before that she will never go to college. Ever. She told him that when she grows up, she'll be perfectly happy with working at the 7-Eleven at the end of their street, and that now that he knows this, he and Mommy can stop fighting about money. What Josie didn't know is that Joe had already told this secret to Jane. It had been a long conversation. They laughed about it, cried about it, and apologized to each other for always arguing about finances. Best sex Joe ever had. And just as he was about to grab his daughter on the right and drag her away from the abomination on the left Josie blurted out the entirety of the secret Josie on the right had in mind. Great. Back to square one. Don't trust her, Daddy. I'm the real Josie. This better be good, Joe heard himself whisper, sounding like a gang leader who had listened to excuses from new recruits. When I was 4, I got really sick after you let me eat a whole carton of ice cream. You threw the box away before Mom got home and told her you didn't know what happened. Joe froze. He had no idea that she still remembered that. She was half her current age and out cold for the better part of 2 days. That's nothing, the other Josie yelled, standing up to prove a point. How about the time we went to the park and you started chatting to a friend and that man almost took me away? Joe's jaw almost fell to the ground. How the hell could she remember that? She could barely walk when that happened. Both Josies were on the verge of crying. That one doesn't matter. You once carried me on one arm and talked on the phone with the other. I saw an orange butterfly, went to grab it, and you dropped me on the kitchen floor. Joe clasped his hands over his ears. No. She did not remember that. How was that even possible? She was just a baby. Not even 5 months old. It was the very first time Joe had to take care of baby Josephine all by herself while Jane ran her errands. He was on the phone with his wife to remind her that they were out of rice. He'd even forgotten that the butterfly was orange, but he remembered it now. Clear as day. It was bright and pretty, and the baby squealed in delight as she reached out to grab it. Yeah, honey, everything's fine. The baby fell head first on the cold tiles from a 5-foot height. Joe, what the hell was that? Jane's mechanical voice was nothing compared to his beating heart. The world was suddenly so loud and yet so still as he looked into the blank, empty eyes of his baby, lying on the kitchen floor. It felt like looking into plasticized cardboard. Shiny and dead. But then she blinked once. Then twice. Then opened her mouth and wailed louder than a police siren. It was the first and last time he was happy to hear her cry. Stop. No more. I don't want to hear more, all right? He was breathing heavily. The girls exchanged looks again. They weren't afraid of each other anymore. It was worse. They were angry with each other. The look on their faces said murder, and it terrified Joe to no end. It's okay, loves. I believe you. You don't have to fight. You're both Daddy's little girls. You're both my darlings, little Josie. And we'll be a very happy family. I'll talk to your mother and... No! The Josie on the left trampled with her feet on the floor. Something she always did when she didn't agree with her parents on something. I'm the real one, Daddy, said Josie on the right from between quivering lips. That always happened when she was upset. She had it from her mother. Both of them were approaching him with tight fists and sunken eyebrows. How about the time you hit the homeless old man and kept driving like nothing ever happened? Joe started weeping. The other Josie pushed the one that just spoke to the side with her shoulder. How about the time when you pushed Stephanie down the stairs and made her lose my older brother? Please, stop. Both occurrences happened before Josie was even born. He hit the homeless man on the way to the hospital. Jane was in labor with his princess. He had no other choice. Stephanie, though. He was desperate. He'd been married to Jane for a few months, and she was becoming dull and dry, and Joe wasn't used to the married life, and for God's sake, he slipped. It happens to every man. It wasn't out of love, it wasn't even out of need, it was just for the exhilaration of change, even if for 5 minutes. It wasn't his fault that the dumb bitch lied about taking the pill anyway. No, Josie. You are not allowed to tell your mother that." Something sparkled in both Josie's eyes. They threw each other a cautious glance and then looked at Daddy in slow motion. "If you don't choose me, I'll tell Mommy about Stephanie." Josie's room seemed to darken and close in on Joe in a promise of eternal suffocation. Joe fell to his knees. The other Josie spoke. "If you don't choose me, I'll tell Mommy, Grandma, Grandpa, and everybody from the office about spicy studies." The room was choking Joe. He couldn't breathe. How in the world could Josie know about spicy studies? That was supposed to be an even better sealed secret than him killing his unborn child and crippling his former mistress for life. Back in college, Joe's brilliant idea for easy money had been a porn site. As its name suggested, the protagonists had all been kids in his year or younger who, both with and without consent, needed spiked drinks before participating. Jane thought Joe finished college with flying colors, but Joe got expelled after just 3 semesters for ruining 43 young and promising lives. That number not including the members of the actors' families. Joe's head was in his hands. He was struggling to breathe. He wanted to turn deaf then and there to stop hearing all the dreadful truths his doubled little girl spilled out on him, like destructive fires of reckoning. He wanted her to stop. Involuntary images of him choosing one of them and choking the other to death popped into his head, and he knew. He knew that if he wanted to go through with it, he would have to hurry. His little Josephines had already opened Pandora's box. Hell, he did more than that. They were swimming in it and throwing its contents all over the place. But Joe's Pandora's box had a false base. And if Joe wanted to proceed with the murderous plot, he would need to hustle before one of them found it. And if you don't choose me, I'll tell everybody that it wasn't sudden, unexpected infant death when baby Auntie died. They discovered the fake bottom. It was over. Joe's biggest, darkest secret was not only one he kept from the world, but one he kept from himself. He looked up at the girls, his face wet with salty eye water, feeling infinitely inferior to the 2 all-knowing 8-year-olds. Joe wasn't a 39-year-old anymore. He was a 7-year-old boy watching the slow rise and fall of his sleeping baby sister's chest, wondering what would happen if he just put his teddy bear on her face for a couple of seconds. His mother called for him and the seconds turned to minutes. He didn't check the rise and fall of her chest again when he went back for the teddy, so when the doctor diagnosed her passing as a case of sudden, unexpected infant death, who was he to argue? Little Joe. Pathetic little Joe. Sorry little murderous Joe looked up at the 2 girls and was back to his guilty, bloody-handed 7-year-old self again. Julie? Is that you? Not one, but both Josies answered him by smiling and holding hands. Joe was less than human then. Girls, he wept. Julie, Josie, I don't understand what you want from me. Their voices were even and unrelenting. Choose. The hope of his future and the dread of his past were mirroring each other before him. He had to make a decision. But how could he? Ignorance only postpones doom, and regret is not enough to be forgiven. He couldn't choose. So Joe did the only thing he could do. He got up, turned around, and entered his nuptial bedroom. Jane was sleeping soundly, oblivious to the worlds colliding in her daughter's bedroom. Joe didn't even shoot her a final glance. He went straight for his ties drawer and picked one. It wasn't his favorite, but it didn't matter. The girls looked his way and followed him with their eyes as he entered the bathroom. always holding hands, never letting go of each other. Joe tied the tie neatly around his neck and knotted the other end around his toothbrush. He didn't know if it would hold, but he was dying to try. Literally. Joe grabbed Josie's plastic ladder for brushing teeth, placed it next to the open door, threw his tie on the other side, closed the door, and yanked the ladder from underneath his feet. The toothbrush held. Ironically enough, it held just enough for Joe to let out his dying breath. It snapped not even 10 seconds afterwards, and Joe's lifeless body fell to the bathroom tiles. The girls knew he was gone even before the toothbrush gave in. Still holding hands, they turned to Josie's bedroom and hid under the bed where they both belonged. Neither of them was the real Josie. The real Josie was sleeping in her parents' bed, hidden in the covers and her mother's arms, the place she always turned to when the monsters under her bed were upsetting her. But that wasn't Joe's concern anymore. Joe already made his choice. You have to listen to me. This isn't right. You can't do this. You can't let this happen. Okay, hold on. You have to listen to me. This isn't right. You can't do this. You can't let this happen. Okay, hold on. Let me try again. Something different, this time calmer. Explain what's happening. Okay. My name is Nick, and as of right now, I am the last person on Earth. They called them quiet rooms. After the wave came, the remaining cities across the globe pulled together to gather their remaining resources in highly defensible areas. They called them hub cities, and the wealthiest of society lived closest to the hub and thus had their pick of the Earth's remaining resources. This, of course, did not last long. 10 years of feeding the lower southern United States nothing but rice and potatoes saw an end to the class system in messy fashion. After the collapse of society, there was a great ravaging, and for a while it looked like we would eat ourselves to death, or worse, cannibalize each other. But then, under new leadership, we began consolidating. From their perspective, not all mouths were worth the food they would eat. It started with prisons, first death row and the mentally insane, and then to those serving life and not long after committing a crime worthy of jail time, all but assured your consolidation. And this is when the quiet rooms came in. No one knows when the law was passed or who made the final decision, but suddenly underground facilities began to crop up in all major cities and in every little town. And after several years of quiet construction, small garage-sized buildings began to crop up wherever the construction had ended. And some families received enlistment papers. The necessary draft, they called it. We always joked later and called it what it really was, a necessary evil. That was until my papers came and I became one of the delivery men. Our job was simple. Await for orders to arrive and retrieve someone identified for scheduled consolidation and take them to a quiet room. To resist these orders and the lawful determination of the remaining world's courts was a jailable sentence, leading ultimately to immediate consolidation. The first week was the worst. Every morning, I put on my uniform, I holstered my regulation bolas, and I patrolled the borders of our small town until I was relieved from post. The times always changed, the hours were never consistent, and I spent every waking minute wondering, praying, hoping that I wouldn't get the call. And I didn't. For a long time. I continued to enjoy the hefty government check I received each month enjoyed the ability to purchase groceries for my family without worry of budgeting, enjoyed the ability to get my daughter new clothes. I enjoyed the peace it instilled in me. And soon, I began to become complacent and even trusting of my government. I began to trust that the only people being taken were those who truly did not deserve to stay. They had gone months without ever making me respond to a single order for retrieval. Maybe it would never come, and if it did, well, maybe it was for good reason. And then the day came when I received my first call, my first order for retrieval. I went to a home, one I didn't recognize, and perhaps stupidly knocked on the door. People began to pour out of their homes at the sight of me, not approaching but watching in terror, disgust, and oddly enough, curiosity. No one knew what to expect. None of us had ever witnessed this happen before, myself included. And then the door opened and I saw my package. An older man, hard in the face, with an intense stare and a jagged set of knuckles wrapped around the side of his entryway, steadying himself up to look at me. He was old but strong, and he looked ready, poised to strike, but he didn't. He just looked at me and said, "Well, I suppose that's it then. I'm to go." I swallowed the little amount of courage I had available in my mouth and tried to moisten my vocal cords to say in what I had hoped would be a determined voice, "Yes. Unfortunately, I believe you are to come with me immediately, sir." I stammered out at the end, still feeling like some respect should be present at the least. I watched his face as he processed the information I had just laid at his feet, and then glanced out towards the people surrounding us. He and I both realized in that moment, I think, that no one was willing to stop this. They all stood by and watched. They knew what I was here to do, that this was necessary, and the remaining courts had their reasons. I held my hand out and directed the man to come outside of his home, and he followed suit after a brief moment of hesitation. He didn't bother to look behind him and even close his door as he walked side by side with me down the steps of his porch. We walked in silence for some time, through throngs of people, none of them doing anything to stop me or him. Parents running into their homes with their children, others letting them watch, pointing as they told their children what their fates could be if they didn't behave and wash behind their ears like Mommy said. And I, in a strange way, felt proud. Proud of the example I was setting, horrified, surely, still hopeful that there was a reason this man did not deserve to live. And I writhed in those emotions for the duration of our walk to the quiet room until finally we arrived at the small building just on the outside of town. The old man paused then. Now, fear was clearly present in his mind. He looked at me in desperation and said, almost pleading, "Why me? What did I do?" I was perplexed. I assumed he would know, or at the very least have some idea. When he saw that I didn't, he looked horribly sad and said, "I just don't get it. I know my medications. They're expensive, but I always pay for them. I need them to help me sleep. The things I've done for this country, the people I hurt in other parts of the world, all in the name of my home, I never enjoyed them. They stayed with me, even when everyone else left me. So why me? Why not you or anyone else? What did I do?" He yelled, and people began to walk over to get a better look. The old man was riling them up, getting them excited as he began to lose control of his composure. He began to look out at them as he spoke now, saying, "You can't let this happen. This isn't right. Who decides who goes?" I started to shake. I knew what was about to happen. I knew what was coming if I didn't stop him from inciting riot. I knew what awaited everyone in this town if they tried to fight the system put in place. And to my family. Stop resisting, or I will be forced to use force, I stammered out. At this, the old man did not back away, but instead took a step closer before I screamed. Are you really going to be this selfish? Can you really not see how dangerous this is for everyone here? What do you think happens to them if you don't go, or what might happen to me and my family if I don't deliver you? Did you ever think that maybe you need to go so the rest of us can stay? And at that, everyone stopped, including the old man. And when he saw that he had lost them, he looked down in a deep, hollow sadness and turned again towards the doors of the quiet room. We walked slowly together to the doors, where I scanned my ID and he his, until the doors opened and revealed a small, completely bare chamber with no windows, doors, or other defining features. A negative space filled with darkness and blank walls and floors. The old man looked at me, and I him. We were both terrified. But then he began to walk forward, almost at his own surprise. He stopped in the center of the small chamber and just stared back at me. Nothing happened. As we stared at each other, a hole didn't open up into the bottomless pit of the earth. Gas didn't begin to flood the chamber, nothing. Until finally, I began to close the door. The old man's eyes widened, but he did not stop me. Instead, he stood, watching me as I closed the door. The last thing I remember seeing was his one eye staring back at me in the darkness. One steely gray eye. And then the doors were closed, and I went home. Nothing else. No more pomp and circumstance. The checks kept coming, and eventually started getting larger, and I kept patrolling. People seemed at ease, suddenly, as if a weight had been lifted. Someone had been chosen. No one else need worry any longer, and I was their hero. The one who protected them from the old man's fate. And then the second call came. And it was like the first time all over again. Everyone held their breath as I made my way to my package's address. When I knocked on the door this time, there was an audible yelp from the inside as a woman cried out in surprise and terror, likely. And then the door opened to a man in his 30s like me, with a young boy next to him. The sound of his wife crying behind him in the living room echoing into the entryway. He looked at me up and down, as if to ask me what I was doing there. But then he said, Who are you here for? And I thought for a moment. Nothing I received ever made it clear that I was supposed to be picking up one person or another. Just the address. I looked at him as I came to that realization, and he came to it with me. He grabbed a suitcase next to the doorway and called his wife over, tasseling his son's hair with a smile on his face. Come along, my love. We have a trip to go on. Did you prepare your bag, like we talked about? He said to his wife. From over his shoulder, I heard her choke, but then come around the corner, putting her hair behind her ears as she openly wept, holding a small case in her right hand. They walked out together, holding their son's hand, who looked near catatonic. He had no clue what was happening, or perhaps knew exactly what was coming but wasn't able in his youth to process it. We walked together to the quiet room with no interruptions like before. We scanned our IDs, and the doors opened, and inside, where I expected to see bones or some A rotten, bloated carcass with some foul creature lurched over it was nothing. The same emptiness as before, just an empty room. The family looked at each other confused and possibly relieved, and then slowly, with the husband leading the way, nearly dragging his wife in with him, stepped into the room and began to hold her in his arms, along with his son, as he stared out at me. And again, I closed the door and remembered the look of his face as the door shut, and all was quiet once more. This was the procedure for a long time. We would go a few months of quiet, peaceful rumination, counting our blessings and appreciating the time we had with our families. I began to feel a sense of real purpose in my duty as a delivery man. I was helping people live fulfilled lives, making them safe from the dangers of those that are hiding in the shadows, waiting to be consolidated. And he was there to get the job done and provide that sense of security to his family and the people of his town. He was its protector, and it was his to protect. And soon, the man began to receive more calls, and he would always respond in the dead of the night or at the crack of dawn. And soon, he began to deliver his packages to their quiet rooms, twice a day, every day for weeks. And soon he began to notice the way the town was flourishing. The remaining people now left behind, small in number though they were, lead extravagant and lavish lives. He himself had enough food in his fridge to have a barbecue every day for the next month. Homes began to become larger, taking up the empty space where their neighbors had once been. A source of stable income became a pastime instead of a necessity, most people having enough in their savings to live like this for the rest of their days. And each day, after it began to slow down significantly, everyone else, much like Nick, began to hope that the following day would see someone else leaving. He could see it in their eyes every day he did his patrols. They would watch him and silently urge him to get rid of someone, anyone, to just go and knock on someone's door and get rid of them. Consolidate them so that those left could have more. He saw it. He knew it. But Nick was a man of principle. He was not a vigilante handing out justice wherever he saw fit. He was a man of law and order, and he would await his orders. And soon, as he knew it would, they began to come in. His neighbors dwindled down slowly to 10, and then in one evening to 7, and a month later down to 3, until one day, almost without the hero realizing he and his neighbor were the only ones left, and he smiled and waited, knowing one day the order would come, that he need not rush. But then one season came, and so did the other, and the order never came. And the hero waited, but still no call came. No order was given, and each day his neighbor began to look at him in hatred. The hero began to fear for his life, for the safety of his property and his family. He would watch his neighbor each night, make it known that he was in his sight, that he would not be caught unaware. But after the 4th night of not sleeping, the hero realized he needed to do something. Something had to give. He made the call. He walked to his neighbor's home. He knocked on the door, and he looked him in the eye and said it was his time to be delivered. The neighbor looked at the hero. His eyes were filled with anger, streaming with tears, his face turned down into a hideous grimace. The hero hated him, and so he demanded that he go with him to be delivered, and the neighbor complied with the orders given to him. They walked together, the neighbor seething in the hero's shadow, until they arrived at the quiet room where the hero once again opened the doors for what would be his final delivery. The neighbor looked at the hero, looked behind himself back at the city, and said, "Is this right?" The hero said nothing. He knew. The neighbor already knew the answer. And when he didn't respond, the neighbor stepped inside, and the hero closed the doors. It was quiet. And every day the hero would wake and do his patrols. His family, distant and fearful, and despite knowing there was no one else to deliver, the hero always waited for another call to come. Waited for them to send him somewhere far away in some other part of the world where others needed delivering. He knew one day the call would come as it always had before. And right he was, but only partially. Because while he did get the call, the address of the family that he was to have delivered was that of his own. He slowly made his way down the stairs, looked his wife in the eye. He had forgotten her name, but she cried now. Cried as she realized that he was in his uniform, his bolas in his hands. And his children sit at the table crying as well. He hadn't realized how grown they had become, or for that matter, remembered there were in fact two of them. His wife began to weep and beg. She fell to her knees and thrashed her fists against the floor as she asked the hero for what she believed was mercy. But the only mercy the hero believed in now is the mercy granted by those who were ordered to be consolidated so that the rest of the world could go on living peacefully. And this was the final test, a test to show he was worthy of putting the world before his own happiness, to prove what he always knew, that he was a hero. And he used this fact to give him strength as he bound his family together using his bolas and dragged them out to the quiet room, where he would complete his duty. Weeping now, the hero pulled his family as they thrashed and cried out against the restraints that bound their arms and legs together, into the lightless chamber. They called out to him, called him a name he did not remember, but he had to push them out. He knew what he was doing was right, no matter how much it hurt. And with what was left of his strength, he pushed, and with a solid effort sealed the doors in front of him and screamed out in agony as he lost everything he loved. He wept for a long time, until finally he began to come to terms with his sacrifice. He stood up and began to walk away from the quiet room to await his next orders, when suddenly there was a thrum beneath his feet, and he turned to look behind him, and what he saw confused and rattled him. Behind the quiet room, the ground had split open and began to reveal a strange obsidian-like material protruding out from broken earth. The shape of it was strangely uniform, and it was accompanied by a loud whining sound as the ground beneath my feet began to rumble even more violently. And then slowly, at first, but then rapidly, the quiet room began to rise. I watched in awe as a structure began to reveal itself hidden deep beneath the earth and rise high above my head height before revealing clear glass. And inside, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In a brightly lit white room, I could see my family. They were looking at me with hatred in their eyes, just like the people I had delivered. And they were standing in a large living space with verdant and lush greenery surrounding every corner, like a localized terrarium. But then it wasn't just them. It was others, too, people I had delivered, I had sent to be consolidated. And they all looked at me with hatred, and slowly I began to realize the structure was continuing to rise. Now, out of the ground and into the air. I looked in terror as I began to understand that I was being left behind. And then I saw him, the old man, his steely gray eyes looking back at me. And I flew into a rage. I screamed as the ship began to lift into the air, taking the remaining survivors of this planet to some other distant, inhabitable planet that could support them. I did not scream, as I watched in silence as other ships began to lift into the skyline. From towns and cities hundreds of miles away from me as what remained of humanity fled the dying world that they had abandoned me in. And then I sat in silence until no more lights were visible from my meager view of the skyline. And I sat still, very still. I'm the hero. I saved the world. Duérmete, niño. Duérmete ya. Que viene el coco y te comiera. When Arthur was a little boy, his abuelita would tell him stories to keep him good and Catholic. Brush your teeth. Eat your vegetables. Don't hold that girl's hand, else a creature with sharp teeth and long claws would come and get you at night when Mom and Pop were asleep in bed. For him, growing up in the deserts of Arizona, it was called El Coco. All his friends had different names for them. The Kukui, the Boogeyman, Baba Yaga, Krampus, and of course Old Hat Lucifer himself. But he remembers meeting one kid, quiet a lot of the time, a transfer. He called it something else. He called it the Visitor. He remembers hearing him say it, the way it made the air in the room stale and stiff, like walking through molasses, the way it rolled out of his mouth and hit the floor in that empty gymnasium. The look on the faces of the other kids, how they all felt the gravity that the name held. He almost forgot how tired that boy's eyes looked. Arthur lived the quiet life of a middle management banker in the city. He went to work, he came home. He never saw anyone on the way back, not without an appointment and a 24-hour reminder. Private. But Arthur, introverted as ever, was a man of some social significance. A year ago, he met a woman who resembled everything his mother ever warned him about. This, in effect, was a form of endorsement. What Arthur could never have expected was that the woman he was fraternizing with regularly, and rather carelessly, was married to the city's mayor. This quickly became something of a massive scandal, costing the mayor incumbent the election. 6 weeks after Mayor Osmond gave his resignation, his family was seen leaving town. It was the last time that anyone would see the Osmond family. Their car was found several miles out of city limits. Linda, found dead in the passenger seat, her throat slit. The children and Mayor Osmond, nowhere to be found. A suspected murder-suicide. It was, presumably, brought on by the social humiliation and the infidelity. 4 months later, and Arthur still got emails from the online gossip colonists asking for a new statement about the murder-suicide. Arthur never responded. Of course he didn't. Why should he? It's not like Arthur was the one who pulled the trigger. He never knew that she was married, least of all to a major public figure. And as soon as the scandal came to light, as soon as he was made aware of what he was unknowingly participating in, Arthur called the whole engagement off, before throwing his phone into the river. Arthur severed ties with everyone. Anyone who knew Linda, knew her husband, his friends and colleagues from university. He couldn't live with the pity they had for him, the morbid curiosity they always shared, the strange questions they would never want asked of them, but were frequently employed as icebreakers. Hey, you're Arthur, right? Aren't you the guy who fucked a marriage to death? He was paraphrasing, he would admit, but the formula was there. It was now, in his bed at 6 a.m., that he was recalling the events of the prior year, recalling the countless mistakes, the immeasurable heartbreaks, and the constant disappointments that people provided him. It was no surprise that Arthur lived a completely private life. So why then, Arthur wondered to himself, could he hear someone breathing outside of his bedroom door? Arthur didn't move a muscle, didn't even dare to make a sound, but instead tilted his head up ever so slightly to see that he was alone in his bedroom. The red display of his alarm clock, illuminating the objects in his room with an evil tinge, casting shadows of horrible creatures with spindly fingers and wiry hair. He must have imagined it, must have been half asleep and still dreaming when he heard it. It couldn't have been breathing. But there it was again, just as strong and distinct as the first. Long, ragged breaths, as if the lungs in this person's body were filled with something thick. Every cell in Arthur's body was electric, every nerve in his body on high alert, the hair on his arms, legs, and the nape of his neck standing on edge as if he had just been struck by a bolt of lightning. He couldn't help but think to himself that this must be what deer felt like, staring into the headlights of an oncoming vehicle, powerless in the face of something you have no comprehension of. Like looking into the eyes of God and finding that his expression is one of hatred and not love. The breathing suddenly stopped all at once, and for several painful minutes, the only sound that Arthur could hear was the dripping of his bathroom sink. Then, a massive roar that rocked the very foundation of Arthur's home. He could feel his bed rocking back and forth, vibrating from the force of the sound, a sensation he had only felt once during an earthquake. He stifled out a short yelp, covering it with his hands as the sound escaped his lips. A primal sound, one made by an animal informing the members of its pack that a more dangerous predator is near. A reaction baked into our DNA by our ancestors who slept in caves, which were frequented by hungry wild animals. It was at this moment that suddenly Arthur understood the stories his grandmother had told him about things that came bumping in the night to take away naughty children. There was the sound of something yelping out in pain, a break of something that sounded like bone, and the sound of something heavy and wet slamming against the floor. Still, the door remained untouched and undisturbed. Arthur began to wonder once again if he must be experiencing auditory hallucinations, imagining that something was behind his door, but too terrified to open it and check. After several more moments of silence and the sound of sloughing wet material striking his hardwood floors left his memory, Arthur began to feel more confident that he had come completely to consciousness. He slowly stood up out of bed, still feeling the need to be cautious. Placing his feet slowly on the ground, half expecting rotting hands to shoot out from under his bed and grip his ankles, Arthur slowly came to stand at his bedside. He turned slowly to face the door, waited several moments for something to happen, for something to break his confidence. But no breathing, no growling, no bones breaking, only silence. Not a single sound. He took a step, heard the creak of the wood underneath his feet slightly, and waited several more moments. Again, he was greeted with complete quiet. He took another step, and then another, feeling his confidence begin to swell. He got within a few steps of the door before a thought suddenly occurred to him. Something felt wrong. He couldn't quite peg down what it was, but it reminded him of when he would forget his wallet on the nightstand. There was some small detail he was missing, and as he took another step towards the door, he realized what it was. His sink. Why wasn't it dripping anymore? Suddenly, the pipes in the walls began to creak and strain. He could hear the steel swelling just underneath the thin plaster walls. It made the walls in his bedroom look as if they were breathing, swelling up and down like ineffective lungs. Then, there was the sound of a crack, a crash, and the rushing of water. Arthur began to slowly step away from the door, making his way back to the safety of his bed. The sound of rushing water increased in strength, and pretty soon, Arthur was able to see what appeared to be a muddy, red substance the consistency of warm syrup creeping in through the crack under his door. He stared at it with abject terror as it continued to stream in, stretching out first a few inches from the door, then several feet, making the puddle a small pool. "What do you fucking want?" Arthur called out to whatever had come to his home in the dead of the night, unsure of what he would do if he received an answer. But as the desperate plea left his lips, the sound of the rushing water subsided. The pool, quickly making its way towards his bed, ceased all movement. It was odd to him that liquid, if that's what this was, could just stop flowing suddenly. The moment of silence was quickly filled with the voice of someone he did not know coming from beyond the door. "Will you let me in?" Arthur did not answer. Couldn't, in fact, as the air had left his body. Whatever this thing was, it spoke to him, clearly and in English. But it sounded like a man, his voice like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "What if I don't want to let you in?" he asked nervously. "You will, when you realize the alternative." The voice was certain, matter of fact even. He tried to process the information, considered his options, and formulated a response. For now, he needed more data. He needed to have some idea of what he was dealing with. "What are you?" It was the next logical question. "Can't you guess? You called me here, didn't you?" Was that true? Had Arthur truly called this creature here just by remembering a story from his childhood? El Coco, the Kukui, the boogeyman, the visitor. He remembered the dead look in that little boy's eyes, remembered that 3 weeks before his parents had died in a horrible accident, just before he was being transferred to a new school. 11 years old, no friends, no family, suddenly in an entirely new state and school. And the thing he was most terrified of? The visitor. "What do you want?" "I want to come in." "Then why can't you?" "Because you have to let me in. That's how this works." The visitor's voice took on an amused quality to it, as if he was aware of some joke that Arthur wasn't, or as if he were playing to an audience. "Believe it or not, Arthur, you called me here. You brought me to this place. And once called, I cannot be sent back. I must be invited in, or you must forfeit that which holds the most value." "What does that mean? What am I forfeiting if I don't let you in?" Arthur pleaded. He hated not knowing the rules to whatever game this thing was playing. But for whatever reason, he was safe in here. This thing couldn't get in on its own, even if it wanted to. But he had to know what would happen if he didn't play by the visitor's games. "What's to stop me from leaving my room or just waiting until morning?" "Morning will not come. And if you would like to leave, that is perfectly allowed. Only choose whether you would like to use the front door or the window. Personally, I'm partial to the door." The door started to rattle, and with it, the floating shelves along his walls adorned with his school awards and collectibles. The figures, still bound in their packaging, came tumbling to the ground, some splintering open, breaking the toy inside into several pieces, scattering them across the room. He watched a framed picture of his grandmother fall to the ground, the glass shattering on impact, the wood frame breaking into 2 pieces. Arthur let out a tormented scream, unable to maintain his composure. He had never felt terror like this, It felt like his heart, beating as fast as it was, would stop beating at any moment. His chest felt like it was being gripped in a vice, and he could swear that he was on the edge of passing out. He was brought back to reality by the sound of laughing. He watched as the pool of maroon liquid suddenly began to retreat backwards under the door, as if there was some kind of sponge or vacuum system sucking the substance back up. And there, on the floor in front of his bed, a cell phone. His cell phone. What the fuck?
I told you. You called me here.
Arthur couldn't breathe. Couldn't focus on anything but the pounding of his heart in his chest. It felt like it was fighting to get out, to abandon him to whatever fate was awaiting him.
Pick it up,
the voice, like rolling thunder, said. Arthur hesitated, looking back down at the floor and the darkness beneath his bed. Now he truly did believe that something may reach out and grab him, but the alternative was angering the visitor. So, he gingerly placed his bare foot on the ground, and after several agonizing seconds of waiting, felt secure enough in his lack of bed monsters to place the other foot down. Walking over, he knelt beside his cell phone. The screen was cracked in one spot, but otherwise, it looked mostly untouched. Surprising, he thought, considering he had chucked it into the river. He could still remember that day. The news had just broken about their affair, and Linda had all but pretended that he didn't exist. And standing there in the freezing cold winter, the rushing water beneath the bridge out of town sending a frigid mist into his face, he couldn't help but feel betrayed. Linda had always told him that they would leave together one day, that they would get married as soon as she got away from her husband, as soon as she got custody of the kids, as soon as the time was right. The time, it appeared, would never be right. They had played with the idea once, getting married. They mused about it one night laying under the sheets, Arthur tracing patterns on her shoulders. "What do you think you would wear?" Linda chuckled. "I don't think I've ever seen you in a suit. Can you even tie a proper Windsor knot?" "I'll have you know that my grandmother did in fact teach me how to tie a tie." Is that right? It sounds weird, like there should be another verb for tying a tie. Just sounds silly. Linda laughed gently, before pushing her head into his chest. Her hair smelled like honey and cinnamon. "I'm never going to meet your grandmother, am I?" "No. She passed away a long time ago. I think she would have liked you. She always had a good read on people. That, and she could always spot a haunted house. Every time we would pass one, she would say some old Cuban lady bruja shit about el mal de ojo or espíritus malos. She sounds like she was amazing." "The best." Arthur snapped back to reality, seeing the cracked screen of the cell phone he was still holding. He suddenly felt sick to his stomach, but didn't voice his discomfort. "What am I supposed to do with this?"
Turn it on.
He held still for a moment, before swiping his finger against the screen, hoping that nothing would happen. But he wouldn't be so lucky. The screen lit up and unlocked to reveal his screensaver, a picture of his grandmother, holding him up in the air so that he could grab clothes off of a laundry line. It had been his screensaver ever since she passed. He glanced at the screen, the image surprisingly clear, and noted that there was an error indication on the top next to his notification banner. Written across the screen, in small, nearly opaque text, he saw the message, "Failure to authenticate." I can't open it. The face scanner must be broken or something."
Or it doesn't recognize you anymore.
The message felt ominous, and was maybe even a bit of an insult. He began turning the phone over in his hand, inspecting its various surfaces, when he heard a chime. He quickly turned the phone back around and saw on his screen a single text message. It was from Linda, and in all capital letters. "Help me." He dropped the phone on the ground and turned his head towards the door. He could feel it just beyond the thin layer of plywood watching him. Was it amused? Pleased by his terror and misery? He couldn't be certain, but now he was flooded with a new emotion. Rage. Just what the fuck is this? Are you trying to torture me before you do whatever the fuck it is you're here to do?
My purpose here is self-explanatory, Arthur. Did you see her text? You should really respond.
No. Fuck you. I'm not playing this game with you. I refuse to take part in this. Linda is dead. Her psycho husband slit her throat and disappeared. She's gone. Chime. Another message. Arthur froze. He didn't dare to move, didn't dare to look down at the phone that he knew was at his feet.
She sounded rather desperate in her first message, don't you think, Arthur?
The entity beyond the door chided. It was taking pleasure in this, all right, but he knew that there was only one way out of this, to play this game until it was bored enough to leave. He reached down, gripped the phone in his hand, and turned it over. Brightly displayed on the screen was a new message. "He's coming. Please. I'm scared." Could it really be Linda? Or was this thing just playing some cruel joke on him before it took him to whatever hell it crawled out of? He swiped his fingers across the screen a couple times, attempting somehow to unlock the screen manually. He couldn't respond to her message on his screensaver, couldn't call the police. His phone was as useful as a brick. "I swear to God, if you somehow have her, if you're doing anything to her, I swear to Christ!"
Neither are present, unfortunately. Perhaps their invitations got lost in the mail. Or maybe they simply burned the invite. Really though, Arthur, this is your party. It's your job to have fun, not to force your guests to provide all the entertainment.
Fuck you!
Ask yourself, Arthur, why am I here? If not to serve some greater purpose, then what? Have you ever seen a miracle? Water to wine, 5 loaves and 2 fish? No? Well, then maybe you should stop praying to entities you've never seen and focus on me instead. I'm very, very real, and I'm right here with you. All you have to do is let me in.
And if I let you in, what will happen? The kid who told me about you, he told me what you did to his parents. Is that what you're going to do to Linda? To me?
Perhaps. But you'll have to open the door to find out.
Arthur felt his blood boiling. How much more of this could he take? He walked back to his bed, sat down, and listened for the dripping of his sink. He stared absent-mindedly into the screen of his cell phone, at the message displayed therein. For some reason, he couldn't help but remember the day his abuela died. She was 98 years old, a fantastic age for a woman who grew up in Havana, malnourished and pressed under the thumb of her militant government. She had grown up in a small neighborhood, where the houses sat on steep hills made mostly of concrete and granite. It was those streets, those houses with their unforgiving surfaces, that raised her to be the strong woman he loved to this day. She had taught him everything about being a man, at least all the things his father never seemed willing to. Senora Rosie, the neighborhood called her. Everyone back home knew who she was and loved her. She would cook food for the homeless and leave plates for them outside of her home. Same for the stray cats and dogs. She would go to neighbors' homes and cleanse them with her old bruja magic that she swore worked wonders. But as strong as she was, not even an all-powerful witch like her could withstand the trials of time. On her 76th birthday, she fell and broke her hips. By her 80th, she couldn't walk anymore. And by her 90th, her mind had started to go with the rest of her health. That is to say, out the window. It tore him apart to see her in such pain all the time, to watch her get confused about simple things, forgetting what channel her favorite novelas were on, losing track of her medication and if she had taken them, forgetting his name. It was hard. Probably the hardest thing he ever did, putting her in a home at 95. But he felt that with the level of support she needed, he just couldn't maintain his own life and take care of her. He still maintained daily visits with her until he was 27, and then the visits started to decrease in frequency. Once or twice a week, and then once or twice a month, to sometimes just a phone call. He hadn't thought about it for a long time now, but he felt a pang of guilt strike him in his chest. What he would give, he thought to himself, to hear her voice right now. Chime. Another message flashing across his screen, this time partially cut off because of its length. Arthur, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was never my intention to hurt you. I just needed you to know that The message cut off. Aren't you going to reply? Poked the voice again. This time, he sounded more together? Whole? It was an odd nuance that he was able to pick up, and the voice was now starting to sound more human. Familiar even. I already told you that I can't. Why don't you just tell me what the hell all of this is about? Did you love her? What? The question caught him off guard. He had never considered it, but he supposed he did. They had planned for a future together, seen each other every week for several months, sometimes twice in one day. But was that love? He knew the sex was electric, the conversations equally as charged, but while he enjoyed her time, he never thought of Linda as his. He always suspected that one day or another, she would sort things out with her husband, or find a new, more interesting partner to occupy her time with. He supposed that he didn't love her. But then what was this pain in his chest? Have you ever heard of Dante's Inferno? It's the story of a man who journeys into hell to recover the soul of the woman he loves. She's been sent to hell for leading a life of sin, and he refuses to leave her to her fate. What does that have to do with anything? Well, the entire time he's walking through hell, taking in its immeasurable suffering, he has a guide. A man who walks with him and makes the nightmares make sense. He was the great poet Virgil, the real-life Dante's idol. Think of yourself as Dante right now. You're wandering through hell, trying desperately to make sense of it all. And what? You're Virgil? No. I'm hell. Just waiting on the other side of this door. One choice away from having you. One choice away from you letting me in. And then, Dante, you can see what it was all for. So that's it. I'm being punished for what happened to Linda and her family? How was I supposed to know? She never told me she was still with her husband. All I know was that they had a terrible fight and she came to me for help. She came to you for comfort in the form of raunchy hotel sex. The only one who had any illusions about her being an innocent and delicate flower was you, lover boy. So what was I supposed to fucking do? Play 20 questions, interrogate her, force her to tell me that she was still fucking her husband and making her kids lunch bags before coming to visit? So, you did hate her children. No, I didn't. I never got to meet them. They weren't. No. You know what? Fuck
this. Fuck you! I don't have to put up with this. You're not real. You're some figment of my imagination, something I ate that didn't agree with my stomach. You can't be real. This is all too fucking crazy. There was sudden silence. No sound anymore. Not even the dripping of the faucet. And it made his blood freeze in his veins. He glanced over towards the door, waited for it to burst open, to reveal some horrible and hideous entity, for the wood to splinter open and reveal the corpse of Linda's dead husband. Imagined what his body would look like at this point after months of decaying somewhere even the police could never find. His rotten eyes peering through the crack in the door, like the scene out of The Shining. But there was nothing. He stood up cautiously, walked over to the door and leaned his ear against it, trying to hear anything on the other side of it, even if it was just breathing. What he heard instead confused him. Crying. The sound of what could only be a grown man crying. He could hear the man mumbling under his voice, the words completely unintelligible. Chime. He nearly jumped out of his own skin. The crying on the other side of the door ceased altogether, and he backed away again, towards his bed. He leaned against the small iron railing and looked at his phone's dimly lit screen again, the battery now below 20%. The red battery symbol flashing ever so slightly. He glanced down at the new message once more, this one also cut off due to its length. He has my kids, Arthur. Please, you have to know what you meant to me, what all of it meant to me. Being with you was the last time I ever felt truly normal. You... He started to weep. He couldn't contain it anymore. The tears started to come. Good. You're almost ready to let me in, said the disembodied voice on the other side of the door now. Arthur didn't care anymore. He continued to weep. He cried over how hopeless it all felt, how meaningless his life had been up until this point, trying to find meaning in his job with Linda. He spent most of his early 20s taking care of his grandmother. He never had time to just be a kid. His mother wasn't able, and he was also the only breadwinner in his household. So while his friends went out and drank and partied, he stayed home or went to work. That changed when he met Linda. She was crying on a park bench. He walked through the park every day to feed the birds, but that day, he found her instead. They stared at each other at first, neither saying a word. Her face was covered in snot and tears, her makeup running for the hills. He didn't have a handkerchief to offer, so he took off his sweater and held it in the air with what Linda described as the kind of smile a guy gives you when he's trying to convince you he isn't a threat. It made her burst out laughing, and he just stood there, taking it in. Her laugh wasn't cute like they tell you it will be in movies. It was unguarded, authentic. The kind of laugh that would show your dentist if you had any cavities. He started to laugh too. And then they had just spoken for hours. They exchanged phone numbers, went their separate ways, and for 3 months he didn't hear from her. But on the 7th day of the 3rd month, he received a desperate phone call. Linda had gotten into a physical argument with her husband. He had bruised her up pretty bad, and she was hardly able to speak over the phone without sobbing uncontrollably. He drove 3 hours out of his way to pick her up. He didn't even remember agreeing to do so, or hearing her ask him to, but nonetheless, they met up, and he took her to a hotel where he made a hot bath for her, and they made love for the first time. So you did love her then? Wait, what? Said Arthur, his stream of consciousness suddenly getting interrupted by the visitor. You just said it. You made love to her. So you did have feelings for her, despite your best efforts. And before even the first time. Bit eager of you, isn't it? Just a tad desperate. You're in my head. Is that so surprising? Come on. Surely you've grasped it by now, Arthur. Get out of my fucking head! You're not real. None of this is real. Not the phone, not you, not Lynn. Chime. Arthur looked down again, his eyes wild and frenzied with rage and desperation now. There was a new message from Linda, yes, but at the top of the screen, he could see a new message, where once it said, failed to authenticate. Scanning, it said. And then suddenly, the screen opened up and he could see all of Linda's messages in front of him. Could see the date and timestamp as well. The messages were from a year ago, the day that Mayor Osmond was seen leaving town. 2:13 a.m. Help me. 2:23 a.m. He's coming, please. I'm scared. 2:26 a.m. Arthur, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was never my intention to hurt you. I just need you to know that I never intended to keep any of this from you. But we just keep seeing each other, and I didn't want to ruin it. Arthur felt his head start to spin. He started to feel dizzy and nauseous, his equilibrium suddenly off kilter. He felt unusually cold, like he just came from the outside, the chill setting into his bones and rattling them in his skin. What is this? This is from the day that that son of a bitch. It was you, wasn't it? You did this to her. It's you, Mayor Osmond, isn't it? No, I already told you, Arthur. I'm Hell, and you are Dante. You must pass through fire and give up all hope, ye who enter here. Suddenly, there was the sound of rushing water again. From under the door, liquid started to pool and rapidly crawl its way towards him. Arthur jumped onto his bed as the water continued to pour in endlessly. No, you said you can't come in unless I let you in. I haven't done it yet. You're not allowed to come in. Arthur, you're not done reading yet. Arthur tried to steady his breathing. The water was continuing to rise, but the door stayed secured. He still had a chance to get out. He ran over to the windows, tugged at them to try and get them to open. But when he pulled the blinds open and looked outside, he couldn't understand what he was seeing. Everything was cast in a gray-blue light. The street lamps below his second-story bedroom outside turned off, the grass swaying oddly. Wait, no, not grass. Kelp, or seaweed? And then, a river bass suddenly swam into his vision, floating through the air. No, not air. Water? I told you. You could choose the window or the front door. You still haven't read all of your messages, Arthur. Arthur turned on his heel toward the voice, and then back to the window. Panic was starting to set in again. Was he underwater? How was that possible? His whole house under water. He kept tugging at the window, trying to pry it open, but he couldn't get it free. He glanced at his nightstand and his alarm clock. He wrenched it out of the wall and swung it above his head like an impromptu flail. He swung it with all of his force into the window several times. The window never even so much as cracked. Just tell me what you want. Tell me what I have to do. Oh, I don't have an answer to that, Arthur. That's something you'll have to figure out. Are you going to open the window and jump? Or are you going to open the door and let me in? If I let you in, will you kill me? It's a possibility, Arthur. Arthur grabbed his head in his hands and let out a mournful scream. He looked over at the window and then back at the door. Finally, his eyes landed back on the cell phone. He ran over to it, the water in the room now at knee height. He swiped open the screen and continued reading. 2:30 a.m. He has my kids, Arthur. Please, you have to know what you meant to me. What all of it meant to me. Being with you was the last time I ever felt truly normal. You made me feel like I was human. Like I wasn't used up and broken. It's not your job to do that for anyone, but you did it for me. And I wish I had messaged you sooner, but I figured you hated me. I love you, Arthur. Please. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Arthur caught his breath. Not just because of the content of the messages, but because he realized now that he remembered reading this before. In fact, in his message thread, he could clearly see that he had read these messages nearly a year ago. He became more confused and suddenly had a question for the visitor. The water, now waist height, made it difficult to move, but he made his way to the door, wading through the murky liquid as it continued to fill up his living space. What happened to her? Tell me the truth. Did you have anything to do with this? No. I was completely innocent. I never could have known. The response suddenly lit a light bulb in Arthur's mind. He quickly turned back to the phone, reading the next message. 2:32 a.m. He's got me locked up in the guest bathroom. He tied my hands but didn't do a great job, so I managed to get out. Luckily, he forgot to take my phone from me. I don't know if you're angry with me and ignoring me or if you're just asleep, but I guess I deserve this. I lied to you. I kept my husband's identity a secret, but I want you to know that you were the singular greatest thing in my life. I love you, Arthur. Please, forgive me. Life is unfair. It takes, and it takes, and it takes. There's no rhyme or reason to the cruelty. We're all just flotsam and jetsam in the great sea that is the human experience. Just trying not to drown or crash and splinter into pieces. Sometimes the end is painless. Sometimes it's brutal and horrific. And none of us ever know which it'll be. The visitor said. He sounded resigned, tired, like he just finished a boxing match. He continued. It's so easy for us to point the blame at anyone else but ourselves. To see the cruelty and say, well, not my problem. Why should I care? I had no part in it. It's surely not my fault. Me. Completely without fault. Arthur started to speak, picking up where the visitor left off. I abandoned my grandmother. I abandoned Linda. I left them to die a cruel, lonely death. How am I supposed to live with that? You try. You do what you can every day, each day, until you can't anymore. And then you keep fighting anyway. I'm just so tired. I know, Arthur. I'm so sorry. What are you? I think you already know, Arthur. Come on, bud. One more message to read. Then, it's time to make a choice. Just remember, it's always harder climbing down. The room fell silent, the water still rising and now just above his chest. Arthur looked at the screen, tears still streaming out of his eyes. trying to see through the salty liquid at Linda's final message. 2:41 a.m. He came in and gave me something to make me sleep. I don't think I'll ever wake up again. I just want you to know, Arthur, I was so excited to give my whole future to you. I love you, and I'm so sorry. Please, when you wake up and see these messages, don't blame yourself. This isn't your fault. You are completely innocent. You never could have known. I love you. Goodbye, Arthur. The water finally crusted over Arthur's head, and he was submerged beneath the briny substance. He felt his body slowly lift off the ground and he began to float, feeling his head just hit the ceiling before he bobbed uselessly in the water. He threw a glance toward the window and then back at the door. Decision time. He swam toward the door, gripping his hands on the knob. The water was freezing and biting into his flesh. He could feel his eyes stinging with the cold as he tightened his fist around the knob. He pulled against the door, trying to get it open, but it wouldn't move. It was like it was frozen in place. It's always harder climbing down. Arthur placed his feet on either side of the door on the adjoining walls. He tightened his fist around the doorknob again and began to pull, throwing his legs and back into the equation. He strained so hard that he could feel the veins in his neck starting to pop with the force of his pulling. He could feel the air in his lungs starting to burn now. The phone slowly floating away from him, spinning slowly as if in space, showing him the picture of Senora Rossi, holding up a little boy who loved to pull down freshly washed laundry. He thought about the day she taught him how to tie a tie, thought about all the conversations he had with Linda all the way into the wee hours of the morning, thought about all the times he laughed so hard with her that he couldn't see straight. It was beautiful. His life had been beautiful. With the last of his strength, he pulled one more time, the air escaping his lungs, bubbling out of his mouth, letting the water in, as the door slowly started to peel open and he could see light pour through, and a voice calling him. "Hey, asshole! Get the hell down from there! What the fuck do you think you're doing? You trying to die?" Arthur snapped his head up suddenly. He looked around him, out to the trees that outlined the river in front of him, felt the freezing mist splash his face, looked down at the rushing waters, and a man standing on the bridge, flailing his arms. In his right hand, his cell phone, broken, with a huge crack in one portion of the screen. "Hey, buddy, come on, man, don't do it, please. You got someone I can call? Come on, let's just have a chat." Arthur looked at the man, dumbly. He couldn't think of anything to say, so he just said, I think I want to come down." All right, that's great. Just be careful, man. It's always harder coming down. I'll be down here. Take it slow and easy. Arthur did just that, slowly making his way down the beams and supports before reaching the ground. The man, Arthur could now see, was a man in his late 50s. Arthur looked out at the river and then back down at his phone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a paperclip, removing the memory stick. What are you doing there, bud?" Arthur didn't answer, but instead chucked the phone into the river, hearing it crack against the rocks before splashing into the water, never to be seen again. "What I came here to do," he answered quietly. "Oh, okay then. That's all you came here to do?" Arthur shook his head. "No, that wasn't all I came out here to do. Well, I'm glad I came then. Let me take you back home. You live in the town just a ways off? Yeah, I do. All right, well, I only got 2 rules about riding with me. No guns and no rolling down the window. Got it. They walked over to the man's truck, which was parked in the nearby snowbank, the same place that Linda's body was found. He stood still outside the passenger side door, looking into the forest beyond, listening to the river. He pulled the door open and then sat down in the passenger seat before asking, Hey, do you have a phone? Mind if I make a call real quick? He asked the stranger. Sure. Here, go for it. Arthur grabbed the man's flip phone, typed in a 9-digit number, and waited before he heard someone answer. Hey. Yeah, it's me. I'm sorry I haven't called in a while. I've just been really busy. No, I'm not. I'm really not okay. My wife tells me she's cheating on me about halfway through dinner. I work my way through the potatoes, the beans, and most of the meat before replying. Who? That doesn't matter. It very much does matter, I think. I imagine a 6'4", muscular, chiseled Greek god of a man fucking my wife. I think about the way he holds her. Is he gentle? Rough? And the noises she makes for him. Is she quiet? Does she scream for him? Michael. I'm working on the last of the chicken at this point, wondering if she's ever fucked both of us in the same day. Michael, listen to me. I want a divorce. I watch her for a while. Her jaw, the hollow of her neck. Is he better? What? Is he better than me? She purses her lips. I think she's going to tell me that he's just different, that she's sorry it had to be like this, and that she still loves me, really deep down. That it was a mistake, and no one could be better than me. But instead, she replies, Yes, Michael, he's better than you. She tells me that she's staying in the house until she finds a place to rent, whilst we sort this out. I say that maybe I should have the bed, and she tells me that, trust me, you don't. In our bed. Sleep on the couch, Michael. And so that's where I find myself, working my way through a bottle of expensive scotch I'd saved for a special day, and browsing the internet. My browsing is aimless, filthy, meandering. I lurch from website to website going nowhere. That is, until I see an ad. Your face, your porn. Do you want to live out your most disgusting, most depraved fantasies? Do you want to see yourself do it? Using state-of-the-art deepfake technology, we're able to show you what your deepest desires actually look like. See them played out across the screen. The things you've only spoken of in whispers that you've never even admitted to yourself. Take control of your life. Be the best version of yourself you can be. This is your face, your porn, your reality. I'm in a fuck it sort of mood, more than a little drunk, and I think that this might be the best way to get back at her. I don't even have to leave the comfort of my home. and I can see what I'd look like doing whatever I want. All those things I never told her, the things she'd never do, I can see it. The ad is blank aside from the text on the white screen. That, and a tacky gif of red lips blowing a kiss before running their tongue along their teeth. I watch the mouth on the ad blow kiss after lurid kiss at me, and start to feel convinced. They'll superimpose my face convincingly into any situation, and I'll watch myself carry out my darkest, deepest desires. There are different packages: celebrity, fetish, slice of life, narrative, and on, but one in particular catches my eye. Surprise me. And so, squinting so that I can read the numbers on my credit card, I subscribe. I fill out a quick form, what I'm into, my kinks, my age, name, that sort of thing. It then requires me to take a video of my face from different angles, then makes me cycle through a few basic facial expressions, takes a sample of my voice, saying a few basic sentences. Not long after, I pass out. I awake to a vicious hangover and a notification on my phone. An email containing the first video. YourFaceYourPurchase.mov. It's really me. Or at least, it looks exactly like me. It's night, and fake me seems to be followed by a camera. Fake me spends the evening going into various shops around town and buying tape and an apple from each store. He seems to make the cashiers nervous, and one girl even starts shaking while she tries to find the code for the tape when it won't scan. He is impatient, raps his knuckles on the desks, calls her a bitch under his breath as he leaves. Wide shot. He walks down the street past the glassed window. The cashier is crying silently inside. That's it? I try to click forward to see if there's anything else, but that's it. I watched the whole thing expecting it to be the build-up to something, but no. Instead, all I see is something that looks exactly like me drive around town and buy apples and tape. I try to see if I can find the website again to cancel my subscription, but I can't find anything. I try and look through my history, but it's not there. In fact, there's just an empty gap between 1 and 3 a.m. Whilst it isn't porn, the technology behind it is still amazing. The person on the screen looks exactly like me. I don't go to work. I watch TV, drink beer, smoke inside. My wife, and she is still my wife, complains. I don't listen. Around 6 p.m., I receive another email. YourFaceYourGums.mov. The camera is focused on the me that isn't me, sat at a table. He's answering questions. It's my voice. My voice. He says he is sorry. He says he does not know. No, he never knew. He is fiddling with something in his mouth, above his teeth. He has never heard that name before. He says if they insist, but it's not like he'll like it. The voice behind the camera laughs. Close-up of his mouth. There is a thick, black hair protruding from his gum, just above his teeth. And he's trying to wiggle it loose. It isn't working. Until it does, and he pulls out a knot of tangled hairs from the pink of his gum. And they keep coming and coming and coming until there's nearly a foot of hair, and with each tug, it wobbles his front 2 teeth a little. He says this has never happened to him before. The voice behind the camera laughs again. I don't sleep that well that night. Something about the videos has unsettled me. They're too realistic. And watching that fake me fiddle with his gums made my mouth hurt. I say nothing to my wife when she comes in, make no effort to
tidy the takeaway boxes from the table. She looks at me for a long, long time as if something is building up inside her, some thought or opinion about me she's always wanted to tell me. And I watch as it almost bursts out of her lips, and then nothing. I hear something look through our bins as I try to sleep. A raccoon? Someone homeless? They disappear when I get up to look. The notification wakes me up. Another video. I try to reply to the address that's sending me these, telling them I want them to stop, but the email bounces back. I have no choice but to watch. YourFaceYourTrash.mov. The me that can't possibly be me is eating at a new table. But the whole table is covered in trash, dirt, empty cans, pizza boxes, rotting fruit, bones, tiny crawling things, etc., etc. There are flies buzzing aimlessly about. He is shoveling as much as he can in his mouth. Coffee grounds spill down his chin, and he coughs. He keeps looking to the left of the camera. After swallowing, he winces, pulls something from his mouth. A razor. He has bitten a razor. His blood is dark and thick and mixes with the coffee grounds that dribble down his chin so that it looks lumpy and black. It coats his shirt and his hands as he attempts to wipe his face. He looks to the left of the camera again and continues eating. At this point, I consider deleting my email account. Something is wrong here. There is something in these videos that's beyond unsettling. I don't remember pulling half of those facial expressions, and his reactions are just like mine. It's too real. That's my wince. That's the wince of pain I know I do when I stub my toe or stand on a thumbtack or bite my tongue. But when I get up to fix myself a drink, I find my wife's car gone. And I know that she's with him, with this guy she's fucking. And I feel a stab of self-loathing that goes so deep it pierces my stomach and makes me retch. I watch the video again. Evening comes. YourFaceYourAnger.mov. He is carrying a bunch of grapefruit in his arms in the street. A small, old man bumps into him and the fruit go flying. They make this wet pop as they hit the floor, and in the noise you can hear the fibers that held the fruit together tear. The man is knocked over. The me that looks too much like me sees someone nearby drinking from a thermos, and, grabbing it, empties the scalding water all over the fallen man's face. Close up. The me that shouldn't be me spits on him and winks at the stunned crowd watching. The fallen man moans and spasms. I don't know why, but I sort of like this one. The noise of the fruit is so satisfying, so visceral, and there's something triumphant about the way fake me snatches the boiling water and pours it over the man. Fake me is in control. That evening, my wife tells me that she doesn't think she ever loved me. Not like the way she loves her new man. And that, come to think of it, I'm not much of a man at all. She says this whilst I try and wipe ketchup from my shirt, but only succeed in getting some on the couch. When she goes to bed upstairs, I watch YourFaceYourAnger.mov over and over again. I doze. With my eyes half open, the me that isn't me, the fake me, winks at the camera. My heart gets faster. I pretend to be asleep and keep my eyes open just a sliver. Fake me walks away from the crowd, right up to the camera, knocks on my screen a few times with his knuckles,
It sounds like glass. He watches through the screen, smiling. His eyes are on me, I'm sure of it. He pushes his face against the camera, against my screen, and stares right at me. There is something behind those eyes. Behind that face. Something dark and waiting. He keeps watching me. I think he knows I'm awake. We stay like that until morning. YourFaceYourNeighbor.mov. He knocks on Mrs. Tay's door. He is holding an apple and tape. She invites him in. He enters. The camera follows. In one movement, he stuffs the apple in Mrs. Tay's mouth and forces her to the ground, where he binds her arms and legs with tape. Someone from off-camera hands him a hammer. Wide shot. Mrs. Tay struggles on the floor. The me that watched me looks through her records. Puts one on. It's old and slow, and the vinyl crackles as he drags her into the basement. The video continues for half an hour more, until the vinyl is finished and there is just a loop of a faint crackle. And then there are two thuds, a snap, and it ends. I can see someone's car I don't recognize in my driveway. It looks expensive. I go to investigate, but can't find anyone near it. And so I decide to go and check on Mrs. Tay. I stumble down the street in my dressing gown, face covered in patches of stubble, and knock on her door. No one answers. Bill Roberts walks past, and I wave at him. "Seen, Mrs. Tay today, Bill?" He shakes his head. I can tell he's trying not to react to how I look. Trying to be polite. I haven't, seen her in a week or so, Michael. A pause. He's finding the right words, I can tell. "You doing okay? You don't look so good." Never better. The combination of emotions I'm feeling is hard to put into words. I am elated. There is a version of me online who is in control and is acting. I am also terrified. Whatever it is on that screen knows about me, knows something about my life. I don't know if it is here, in this reality, or if it is just peering in. Either option makes my chest tight. I've drunk the house dry and have to make several trips to stock up on liquor. I even call a few old contacts and manage to get some pills, although I promise myself I'll only take them when things get really, really bad. YourFaceYourTrial.mov. The shortest video so far. The me I wish I was me pushes against his jaw, probing. Slowly, surely, he slides his hand under the skin of my face, until I can see the outline of my fingers under the skin, like 5 giant malformed veins. He wriggles the fingers, and the skin comes away from my face. My ring finger emerges from my eyelids. He pulls the hand out, and it is covered in some sort of embryonic fluid. He winks at the camera. At me? I try the same thing that evening after I've shaved, pushing my fingers into my face as if the skin is going to slip and I'll be able to do what he did. But nothing happens. My long nails cut the tender, freshly shaven skin, and I end up just moving my face the conventional way. I smile, then frown, then stick out my tongue, then puff out my cheeks. Once I'm convinced my face still works, I go to bed. I think my wife sneaks him in the back door, her lover. her, Casanova. I can hear them fuck, I think. I can't wait for morning. Can't wait for a new .mov. I watch YourFaceYourTrial.mov on repeat to help me sleep. And when he is convinced I'm asleep, he comes right up to the camera again. But this time he fiddles with the edges, as if testing the boundaries. His breathing gets deeper, lustier. He cannot find a way out, so he just watches, cycling through expressions the way I did, convinced that I am asleep. Am I? When I wake up, there is a note from my wife telling me that she's moving in with him for a while. There is a voicemail from work telling me I'm fired, and that there will be no severance pay. YourFaceYourJunkies.mov. I finds a couple of junkies on the outside of town. He shows them a huge stack of cash and they both nod. They have about 6 teeth between them and walk with a pronounced stoop, taking him to an abandoned building on the edge of town. He says, "Go in ahead of me, I'll be right in." They pause for a while, trying to work out what the catch is, why this seemingly average guy would offer all this cash up front. But he hands them both small foil packages and they quickly dash inside. As before, he slowly slips his hand under the skin of his face, working it up and up and up until both hands are completely under the skin. The camera pans down to the rusty gate that borders the property. He hangs something from the gate before walking down the overgrown path into the house. It takes me a while to realize that the thing hanging from the gate is a face. My face. Like a mask, the mouth and eyes are empty, and the skin flaps like a heavy flag in the breeze. There is the sound of cars driving past every few minutes. Then, 2 noises like grapefruit bursting, fibrous and wet and sudden. He walks back down the path and puts the face back on. I do not manage to see what lies under that face, but I desperately want to. I think my hair is falling out. I take a long walk around the block. When I return, I find my wife staring at my laptop as if she's seen the devil. She turns to me slowly. "What the fuck is this, Michael?" The laptop is positioned behind her back, so I can see the screen and her at once. I remember the contents of YourFaceYourJunkies.mov and start to panic. If that fell into the wrong hands, with no context, I can explain. The videos, they're not me. All of the places, the situations, they're fake, I think. She shakes her head. "What situations? Jesus, Michael, it's just hours and hours of footage of you whispering to the camera? It's just your face. What's fake about that?" I can tell she's a little scared. Her disgust at me slowly morphing into something uglier, nastier. She takes a couple of steps back as if seeing me for the first time. Behind her, I can see the me that isn't me. The fake me smiling at the camera on the screen. The footage is paused, but he's still moving. Closer and closer to the camera, his eyes wide and with a rigor mortis smile. A smile as if he's just learned how to control the musculature of his face perfectly. And he's holding a finger to his lips. Shh. She takes another step back. I try and warn her, but no words come. Instead, I'm frozen in fear, seeing the fake me grow closer and closer to the camera, to the screen as her back's turned, and he's pushing against the glass of the screen, trying to find a weak point, a crack that will allow him to move from his reality into ours. She can't take it anymore. She turns around and without looking at the screen, she picks my laptop up and smashes it on the floor. "You're sick." She leaves. The thought of the screen smashed for some reason terrifies me. It's as if whatever barrier was between me and that thing is broken. And although I can't see anything, I feel him leaking into our world. Like the soft hiss of gas through a broken pipe or air escaping a valve. I take the laptop to be fixed. Pay extra to make it happen as fast as possible. As soon as the screen is fixed, I take it home, desperate to turn it on, to see if there are any new videos to check on the old ones. I try loading YourFaceYourPurchase.mov. The first video I was sent. A familiar scene plays, except there's no fake me. It's the exact same footage, I'm sure of it, but the me that isn't me isn't there at all. The cashier still weeps, silently, but it's not due to any version of me scaring her. I try loading YourFaceYourAnger.mov. The same. The exact same video, but the fake me isn't there. The man still falls over, coffee is still poured on his face, the crowd still reacts, but there's no me. YourFaceYourJunkies.mov is now just footage of two junkies walking to a crack house and entering it. They still don't leave, but there is no face on the gate, nothing. No sign that I was ever there. The house suddenly feels so empty. I can hear the faint tap, tap, tap of the branches against the upstairs window, the gurgling of the drain. The way the old wood creaks ever so slightly with age. I am alone. And I know then that the reason he's not on the screen is because he's here. With me. As I feel sweat start to run down my back, I receive one final email. Your face, your turn. .mov. Wide shot. Me. But the real me this time. Alone. The room is full of trash, rotting food, empty beer bottles, liquor bottles smashed on the floor, pill bottles, crumpled clothes. The real me holds up a hand, waves it. This is live. This is real time. This is happening. Now. The room is dark. Objects are obscured, in shadow. Something moves behind the window. A curtain rustles. Bottles clink. He's in here, somewhere. Watching. Waiting. I am alone with myself. And I have all the time in the world.
Chilling tales for dark nights.